Richard, let me go to our candidate, the congressman, former Congressman John Delaney. Congressman, you spoke to this convention. You seem to be very passionate about the road that the party must take if it is going to defeat President Trump. Explain.
So I think what the party's got to do is make sure it focuses on those kind of kitchen table, pocketbook issues that matter to most Americans. Their job, their pay, building infrastructure, fixing health care, doing things to improve public education, the kind of issues that every family is dealing with, no matter where you live in this country, right, no matter whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent. If we become the party that puts the worker at the center of our platform and the working family at the center of our platform, I think we're going to do really well against President Trump.
Why haven't we heard more about infrastructure? Why haven't we heard more about those kind of basic issues? If you go around the country, roadways, highways, tunnels, all need rebuilding. I mean, it is as immediate as walking outside of most people's homes. Why haven't we heard more about that?
I mean, I talk about it. I don't know why, because it's the kind of issue you can win independents with. You can win some Republicans with this issue. If you talk about common sense infrastructure plans, roads, bridges, rural broadband, right, helping ports, rebuilding the water. I mean, we look at the television, we see cars going into these big sinkholes.
Right.
We talk about Flint, how the kids aren't drinking clean water. I mean, these are the kind of issues the American people really care about, and I think we can win elections on these kind of issues.
Now, you are one of those that have polled in the lower segments. How do you intend to build up your name recognition and your message to go to the higher tier of those that are being polled?
So I think it really starts in many ways next week. I mean, as you know, we're having the first debate next week down in Miami. And, you know, that's the first debate of the 2020 Democratic presidential cycle. And I think this is when most Americans are going to tune in.
Right.
Most of the Democrats who have been tuned in up to this point have been activists or people who haven't tuned in that much, and they know a couple of the names, right? They know the vice president. They know Senator Sanders, right? These folks have 100% name ID. But me and many of the other candidates aren't particularly well known nationally, and I think that changes next week. And so I think this whole election is going to change.
How do you distinguish yourself without being divisive at the debate?
So I'm running on real solutions, not impossible promises. I think respectfully, some of the people that I'm running against are running on some impossible promises. And I think at the end of the day, if we go to the general election and we start running on some of these things, we're not going to win. You know, Medicare for all is a good example. I want every American to have health care. I have a plan that gives every American basic health care as a right for free. But I don't make private insurance illegal. I mean, does anyone really think we're going to win the general election if we go out and tell the American people that 150 million of you that have private insurance, and a lot of them like it, that we're the Democratic Party are going to make that illegal? So these are the kind of things I'm talking about, which is let's do some common sense things. Let's stand for the politics of addition. We got a lot of people without health insurance. Let's get them health insurance. Let's not go around taking health care from the American people. Why do we got to stand for that? So these are the kind of things I'm talking about, which I don't think are divisive, right? I'm talking about how we solve a problem.
How would you deal with the fact the president now has delayed 2 weeks sending ICE out to apprehend illegal immigrants? How would you, in those 2 weeks, if you were at the table, what would you say would be the immigration policy that could bring the Republicans and Democrats together on this issue?
I think we got to go back to 2013. Where, as you know, we had a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill that actually got a lot of Republican support in the U.S. Senate. It would have passed the House of Representatives where I was serving, but John Boehner never gave it a vote. And President Obama would have signed it into law. That was a bipartisan compromise. It was big. It reformed every aspect of our immigration system. I think a significant majority of the American people are still behind that kind of approach, and that's where the Democratic Party. If we want to fix immigration in this country, we got to beat Trump in 2020, and then we got to get back to the table with the bipartisan framework like we had in 2013. I think we can do that deal.
All right. Thank you, Congressman John Delaney.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.